Good day, my name is Kobicypher and welcome to my channel. In this lesson, we will build an expense tracker using JavaScript. And so let's get started. Now, as you can see, I have already gone ahead to build the UI of our project. And so if you want a similar UI, then I would encourage you to pause the video and then copy the code so you can have the same UI as I have over here. So this is the HTML and then this is the CSS. Now the focus here is not on HTML nor CSS. The focus is on JavaScript. Okay, and so I'll just slowly walk you through the code, and then of course you can pause it and then go through it at your own pace and type the code. Okay. You can also have a better UI, a more good-looking UI than my own. That's fine. Okay, so that is it for the CSS. Now let's go straight to the JavaScript, the focus of the video. And so we begin with our selectors. And so let me just add a comment here, selectors, if I can spell selectors. And then what are you selecting? You select some elements within the HTML, and then you apply the functionalities and the likes to. And so what are you selecting first? You select the button. And so over here, as in seeing the UI, you select this button. When the user clicks, something must happen. And so this is the button. It has a class of btn. You can add an ID and then select the ID. But I'm leaving it with the class because I want to focus on the class. Okay. So what we'll do is that we'll create a variable. No, we will select the selector, sorry. So you begin with selectors and then we will just give it a name, add expense btn, and then we say document. We go into the document. The whole of this is a document. So we go into it. What do you want? Query selector, and then the name of the class or the element we are selecting is, we give it a class name, this one, btn. Okay. Of course, there are more elements we need to select. For instance, we also have to select the expense list, this one, and then later on we have to select this also. And so let's go on. So you select this expense, if I can spell expense list, and then document. We go into the document, query selector, and then what's the name again? Expenses list, I think. You can always confirm expenses list. Okay, there you have it. Next, you have to select the total amount. And so we have this, we go this way, const, if I can spell const, this one. Then we deal with total amount or total expenses. I should call it documents, the same thing, query selector, price selecting. Okay, I think I forgot the dots over here indicating it's a class. Okay, so what was the name again? Let's confirm total amount. Total amount. Awesome. Next thing you have to do is you have to create some variables. Now, let me just add the comment variables. You will need a list of expenses, and those expenses are what we'll be leaping through. And so let's just let expenses at the moment, or for now, we will set it as an empty list. And then, of course, we have the amount. 0 for now. I think that it's appropriate to just, since it's total, let's just call it total. I think so. This will be the appropriate name for us to use. Okay. Next thing we have to do is that we need to create functions that will help us to, will aid us in achieving the purpose we want to achieve. Now, these functions, what they will do is that the function will be responsible for rendering the list of expenses onto the HTML page. And of course, it will help us iterate over the that's the word, iterate over the expenses array, and then generate HTML markup for each of the expenses. Okay. Now, for each of the expenses. So at the end of the day, if you click on add, you'll be able to fill the form and then you add an expenses to it. So it will be populated onto the page. You will see this as we go along. And so let's just put it to use function. What do you call it? Let's just call it render. What do you call it? Render expenses. That will help. Okay. Okay. And this is how you create functions in JavaScript. There's no need for the P. Okay. So as I explained, the function, what it does is that it is responsible for rendering the list of expenses onto the HTML page. And so what we have that we have an empty HTML over here. Those of you who prefer the semicolon, you can ignore it. It will work regardless. Okay, so what we have is we have the expenses, these expenses over here. And remember, it is expense. It is what? It is a list. And so we can always call it, why don't we even call it expenses? Since it's a list. Expenses. Yeah, this is better. It's a list. So we can always call an array like the for each. There are a lot of them, but we use the for each for now. We can call it. And then what do we do? Let's say expense. Each of them It's an expense. Single one. Of course, let's add index for, I mean, the index will help us to identify each of them individually. In future, if you want to probably edit or something, even it will help us in the deletion. You'll see very soon. Okay. So let's just fat arrow. You can also ignore the factor if you want to. What we'll do is that we will just have this HTML over here, and then plus equal to, what do we do? The backtick. If you don't know where the backtick is, on the just beneath the escape key, there is this. I don't know the name of that thing over there, but just beneath the escape key is over there. Okay, so what we'll do is that over here, let me just pause the video and type the code, and then I'll walk you through, because I'll just be typing a list of a bunch of HTML code over here. So I'll pause the video, finish it, and get back to you. And so that is it. That is it. Honestly, it is very annoying typing this in a JavaScript file, but hey, that is it. And so what this will do is that, as I told you earlier on, it's responsible for rendering the list of expenses onto the HTML page. And so anytime you add an expenses, you have the description over here, and then the amount, and then a button for deletion. You see it very soon in the UI. Okay, so that's what we have. Now, after this, what we can do is that we can just go on and then have the expenses, append it, dot inner HTML, and then assign it to this HTML over here. HTML, why can't I get it right? Okay. And then we have the total expenses. Remember the total expenses. Oh yeah, the total expense. And then what do? We just test the content, and then also assign it to the total. And then we can just, I like 2 decimal places. So just leave it at 2 decimal places. If you don't want it, you can just ignore this part. Okay, so that is it. And so this is the function that will render the expenses. And so we need to have a function that will help us to add the expenses, and then another function to help us to delete the expenses. And so we can go on and build those functions as well. We have this one over here, and then outside of this, another function for adding expenses or expense. So let's say expense is a function, and then what do we do now? And so we begin with creating a variable description, if I can spell it, and then what this will do is that we need to have a prompt, and then if the user tries to enter or add an empty, the input field is empty, we need to prompt the user that you cannot add an empty field. So we need to just put something there. So let's say enter expense description. Put the right. You can put whatever text you think is appropriate. If I can spell description, enter the right, or enter description or expense description, and then we have the same. So now, if it is not empty, what do we do? There's no need to do anything. We just, if it is not empty, just return nothing. Okay. Then we go to the amount. Let's let's have a do while loop. Yes, you can use while loop, but I think a do while loop will help. We'll do it once, and then before we do the checking. And so yes, I think a do while loop will help. Probably, let me just go ahead and type it. You will understand it. So we'll do this. Do what I'm typing. What do you have? You have the, if you can have it. Okay. And then we are telling the user to do something. Again, prompt, enter an amount. Yeah. I hope that is correct. Appropriate English. And so again, if the description field is empty, we are telling the user, notifying the user to enter something. Again, if the amount field is whatever the user typed, it's not a number like a text. If the user typed a text, we are telling the user to no, don't do that. We don't want a text. Enter an amount. So we can say enter expense amount. That should help. Okay. So you know the syntax of do while loop, you need to bring the while it is not a number. It's not a number. What is not a number? The amount. Whatever the user typed, if it's not a number, we are telling the user that no, we don't expect something like this. We expect you to type a number, or if it is less than 0, if it's less than 0, so we would prompt the user to enter an amount that is greater than 0. Okay, so that is it. Okay, now you create an object which will help us during the addition. So you call this object expense. Remember, we can use the same name. Okay, the other one was even expenses. Of course, if it's, we can still use expenses over here. Why? Because this will become a local variable. The other one is a global variable. This is a local variable. So we can use it within a function, and then it will work anyway. So we create an object, and this is how you create an object. So we have description. Let me just take it from here before I make mistake. Description. I mean, per the ES6 feature, if the this and this are the same, we don't have to repeat it. So you can just ignore this. And then the next thing is the amount. Okay. If the key and property are the same, you don't have to repeat it. You can just ignore it. Okay. So what we'll do is that since we have this object, we'll push this object into this array. So what do? We go straight down, and then what's the name of the array? If you remember, we just checked it out, expenses dot push. What are we pushing? If you remember, we are pushing this object, expenses, into that array. And so anytime the user fills the form, there's no error in the form, and the user clicks add, what do? We are pushing into the array, and then we populate it, or we present it on the HTML markup page. Okay. We also need to work on the total. So what do we do now? We have the total, and then the amount. I think this is corresponding for amount. And then finally, we need to invoke this function. So render expenses. It's a function. I hope the name is correct. Yes. Okay. So that will help us to add, what do you call it? Add an expenses. Okay. You understand? So that is it. Basically, that is, of course, after you have to add an event listener to this button. So add event listener. What event is a click event? Can I spell click? It's a click event, and then you have add expense. Okay, awesome. The next function we need to work on is the delete for deletion. And so we need to find a way to delete if the user clicks on the, I think this should be correct. The delete. Anytime you add an expenses and it displays over here, it comes along with a delete button. This one, delete button. And so we need to have a function. If the user clicks on it, you should be able to delete that's selected expense. Okay, so delete expense. I think that should be the appropriate name. But we need to pass an index, so we know the ones we are deleting. If not, we will end up deleting everything over there. And so we make sure that the index is not less than 0, or the index is not more than what we have, the total length of the expenses over there. And so we see greater than or equal to expenses. Remember, the expenses is a list, so we can call the dot length on it. Okay. If it's true, just return. We don't do anything. I mean, if this is true, we don't do anything. Just return. Okay, so we just go ahead and say, what do we say? We just say the total. If I can spell total. Okay. Now, when you delete, you have to subtract the price of that from the total amount. You understand me? So that's how come you have the minus equal to. So it's equal to what? Expense, the expenses, and then we pass the index over here, dot the amount. Okay. Then expenses, if I can spell expenses, we splice it. Splice method, you can check it out, or you can check it out from the Google and from the JavaScript documents, W3 schools and the likes. Okay, or you can just Google it to just know what the slice does. Okay, of course, if I place the cursor on it, you also have some notes about it over here. And then the next thing you have to do is, of course, we need to invoke the render expenses method or function we created over here. Awesome. So this is it. So this is how you, this is a function for adding and deleting an expenses. Okay, so now we have the expense list dot add event listener. What event are we adding? Obviously it's a click event. And then we have a function over here which takes an event event, if I can spell event. And then we have the if statement over here, event dot target. If I can spell target class list, if I can spell it, class list dot contains. What does it contain? What does it contain? It contains the delete. This one, going to the HTML. Where is the delete? Of course, no, not the HTML. It's over here. This one, delete expenses button. Delete expense. If I can spell it, expense BTN. Let's see if the name is correct. Delete expense BTN. Let's just try and select it. Okay, yeah, it's correct over here. Delete expense BTN. If it contains it, then that's a good thing. We can go ahead and let me just get rid of this and do what? Do our deletion. And so const, let's call it index, create a variable, call it index, then pass int is pass int event. If I can spell event dot, what are we targeting? Target, of course, the parent node, data set, and then the index. JavaScript, if I can spell index. JavaScript is, that's how it works. And now when you do these things, you understand why people like to use the React and the likes. Okay. You pass the index over here. Okay. So basically, that's all we need to do as far as the JavaScript is concerned. This is all we need to do. This function will do what we want to do to help us to achieve the purpose of the video. The expenses tracker. Let me just format this. Okay. Awesome. So what we'll do is that we have this, we have that. We will refresh our page and see if we're able to achieve what we want to achieve. We click on this, nothing happens. I think it's a bit slow. Okay, that is it. Let's cancel it. We click on it, the dialog opens for us to enter. It says enter expense description, so maybe it's for food. And so we click OK, enter the amount, let's say $10. Okay, there you have it. Awesome. And then it has reflected over here also. We can add more. Let's say for water is life, so $20. We add, the total has been reflected. We add one more. Let's add book. We eat, we read. Okay, $5. And then the total has been reflected. Can we delete? Yes, of course, we can delete. Exactly. That's excellent. We can delete this one. And when you do the deletion, and when the deletion does occurs, it also reflects or updates the total expenses we have. Okay, I can see that we should add currency sign or symbol to this. Probably we should find a way and add it. If you can do that. If not, let me just try and add it. Okay, so you go into, there's no need for us to go even into the ATM. We'll just add it here, because this is where the total amount is. So we'll just add one more dollar to this, and that's all. And so we refresh. Okay, we add this time around book first. We read before we eat. $10. Excellent. Okay. Water. We take water before we eat. $20. Water is life. And then we have, probably next time we can have the food, and then the food we can say $2. Awesome. There we have it. Okay. And so the same way we added the symbol, the dollar symbol to that, we can also add the same over there if you want to. Okay, but of course, if you don't want to, you can leave it as it is, and that will also work. I think I'll leave that one to you to do that. Now, what we can do is, going forward, you can save whatever you type here, the user type here, you can capture it and save it in the local storage, so that when we refresh, we don't lose what we have typed over here. At the moment I refresh, we lose everything over there. You can save it in the local storage or any database or storage of your choice, so that when the user refresh, you don't lose it. Because at the moment, just after refreshing, I have lost everything, so I need to add all the time. The data is not being stored anywhere, so let's just add one of them and see. $20, and there you have it. Okay, you can add, you can delete. Okay, and so that is it. That's how you create an expense tracker using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Please, if you enjoyed the video, kindly like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, Stay safe.